Well, welcome to the program, Matthew. It's great to catch up. I think the last time we spoke was when I was in LA about 18 months ago.
Yeah, no, it's great. Great to see you again. Thanks for having me on your show.
Now, I always start with asking, how did you come to Treasury and why did you make Treasury your career?
Well, interestingly, I've always had an interest in the capital markets. And when I was exploring sales and trading opportunities in New York, my business school roommate interviewed for a summer position with GM's Treasurer's office in New York. And he told me about this rotational program, which I'd never heard of. And when I graduated full-time, I interviewed with them, got the position, started there right out of grad school, which began my Treasury journey.
Just for the listeners, you started your career in accounting with KPMG and spent 4 years with them before moving to GM, General Motors, on that graduate development program that you mentioned. And that worked across capital markets, Treasury, M&A, a 5-year program where you rotated annually across different roles. You then moved into Treasury and spent a 12-year career with Healthpeak Properties in the REIT sector, climbing all the way to Treasury. And then more recently, you've joined Unbail-Rademco-Westfield, which most people will know as the mall business, the Westfield Mall business. And you're essentially the treasurer for the US, but called the head of front office Treasury. So been there for 12 months. What would you say have been your highlights over that journey?
Yeah, I'd say if I look back, a couple of the larger transactions I was involved in, first at General Motors, I was part of the team that raised the largest amount of financing ever to date by a US company. That was a $18 billion capital raise. And we worked with every single bank across all of Wall Street on the biggest transaction of its time. And that was an amazing experience. And I definitely put that as a highlight. And then, more recently, a handful of years later, helping to grow Healthpeak, or HCP as it was previously known, from a company with about, call it, $7 billion in assets up to about $30 billion, and becoming a best-in-class REIT, joining the S&P 500. That process was challenging and rewarding. But one transaction in particular, I remember I was given about 7 days or a week to line up a $3 billion underwritten bridge acquisition facility for a life science portfolio. And I was empowered to lead that transaction. That was just one of many that I was just, it sticks in my mind because, again, it was such a short time frame for such a big dollar amount, and it had to be 100% committed. And I was excited to get it done and facilitate the acquisition of that portfolio.
That's a great feather in your cap. Like, those transactions, I think, are the sexy part of Treasury, aren't they? So to have so many, it's amazing.
Yeah, no, it was great. It was great.
And I think, interestingly enough, GM, I think, is one of those that is really out there in terms of, from a Treasury perspective, one of probably a handful that I would put as like best in class. So to have a 5-year graduate program through there must have been an amazing learning experience.
Yeah, no, it was truly a remarkable experience, and it is definitely where I start off my career. And they train not just me, but there's many. I call them like graduates of the program there in New York that have gone on to be treasurers or CFOs in a number of different finance organizations in all different industries. And
then I guess on leaving that, you joined Healthpeak and climbed through to treasurer over 12 years. Talk us through a little bit on that journey, because that must have been a great ride.
Yeah, no, that was very interesting in that, I was brought in by the CFO to join Healthpeak, who wanted to completely redo the Treasury department from scratch. And interestingly, he welcomed the fact that I had no real estate background. So he wanted me to come in, look at everything from a fresh perspective, put in all the policies, procedures, reporting materials. While I was there, I worked for a number of different CFOs with different backgrounds and styles, that over time built a collaborative team which supported the company's growth and worked seamlessly with all the different groups within the organization. And as I mentioned, grew the company by leaps and bounds. Bringing the company from relative obscurity to a household name across the banking industry.
And over that journey, you haven't worked with a lot of businesses, but you're probably like big organizations where there's been a lot of different people. How has networking been something that you've approached?
Yeah, in terms of networking, I'll give you my thoughts on networking. And this is, this advice is probably more towards, some of the more junior folks in their career, and based on my experience. The first thing is I always found that, network when you don't need it. From my perspective, the goal of networking is to build strong, lasting relationships. And so this idea that someone finds themselves in needing a network, well, I never want to find myself in that position. I want to already have my network, and I give that advice to everybody else. Always always do your networking when you really don't need it. The second thing I'd say is to seek to help others. Reach out to those in your network to see what they're up to. Maybe you can help them with an idea or even an introduction. People will be much more likely to remember you if you are genuinely helpful to them. And then when you actually do need something from your network, you'll find that it'll give back to you because you've been giving along the way. And then the final thing I'd say about network is don't force networking. I talk to folks that are junior in their career, and they're like, how do you know so many people? How do you even begin? I say, start with the people that you've gone to school with or you've worked with in the past, and by just simply staying in touch with people that you already know, you'd be surprised how big your network already is, and how big it can be by just kind of cultivating the folks that you already know and already been in contact with.
I totally agree with that. I think and absolutely nailed it, is when your network is most relevant to you is when you don't need it. And that's when it's the best time to build it. So I totally agree there. What about mentors? Obviously, being on the GM program, I would imagine you've been exposed to a lot of different people who helped and mentored you. How have you approached that, or have they been formal mentorships that you've had, or just more informal?
Yeah, I'd say, first I'd say, having a mentor is a fantastic idea. No matter, what level you are in your career, whether you're, just starting out or you're mid-management or even senior management. For me, my mentors were never formal, but rather former colleagues or bosses that I worked for that I'd seek advice. For me, the idea of a mentor is that I had these folks that I really trusted, I could bounce ideas off of with a fresh, unbiased perspective. I view my mentor as kind of like a personal board of directors, where like a board, you say, this is what I want to do. Do you think this makes sense? And they say, yeah, maybe try to do this and nudge it a little this way or a little that way. But just kind of, my mentors have kind of enhanced the steps that I've taken along my career.
I like that, a personal board of directors. What would you say is the best advice that you wish that you'd known back when you were starting your career that you'd know now that you wanted to pass on to the listeners?
I'd say for folks that are, joining an organization is seek a wide variety of business experiences. If you have an opportunity to rotate, somewhere else within the company, I'd say go for it. If it's could be, marketing or investor relations or, something outside of finance. I think in today's, with today's complex companies, the more you can put yourself in others' shoes and understand different aspects of the business, I think the better you'll be at, being a finance executive or someone in finance that helps support the broader organization. So the more you can, see other parts of the business, the better. The other thing I think, that I learned that I think is valuable advice is, don't bring problems to your boss or supervisor, bring a recommended solution. This is something I tell to, all my reports, and that's what differentiates someone who's, in meeting expectations or average performer with those that are exceeding expectations. So I find that often, the best ideas come from those who are closest to the details of situations. So bring me an idea. It may not be the best idea, but at least it's a good starting point. And I want to see your thought process. And there's a good chance that because you're closest to the situation, that will be the best idea. And then the final thing I'd say is, in finance is always have a customer service mindset. So I always tell folks to report to me to build relationships with other groups within the company and to be pro-business. How can you, and your finance or treasury experience, how can you, or even accounting, how can you bring that to the table to help others within the organization? I always find that there's folks that are really, really good at other things outside of finance and treasury, and I can help them make better decisions by bringing my skill set to the table. So always make sure you're looking to help folks, and the one thing you don't want to do is have a gotcha mentality, but have a how can I help folks in the organization mentality.
What are the things that you look for the most when you're hiring your direct reports, Matthew?
Sure. I think what I found is, if a recruiter has direct treasury experience, that's great. But from what I found, that generally isn't the case. I'm a huge proponent of hire the athlete. So what I look for is strong, smart, someone who has like a natural interest in treasury or in business, and has what I call intellectual curiosity. I also look for folks that would be great team members and have that ability to work with others, or play well in the sandbox. So again, smart, intellectually curious, and a team player. Those are critical.
Definitely. And from I guess the treasurer role, what do you think makes a successful treasurer in the eyes of the C-suite?
Yeah, I think a treasurer, I guess it depends on where the company is in terms of the growth profile. I think in a stable environment, a treasurer needs to be able to raise capital at the lowest cost as possible. Therefore, when you raise capital and have a low financing cost, all that inexpensive capital helps the bottom line and just drops down and helps the company be profitable. However, I think, in my mind, the number one rule of a treasurer is simplistically, this is extremely simplistic, is just don't ever run out of money. And it sounds simple, but it's actually critical. And the more you can come back to it, the better. The board is looking to you to always ensure that the company has multiple sources of liquidity, because unexpected events will happen and you need to be prepared. Whether it's a global credit crisis in 2008 or COVID, make sure you're thinking about, what contingency plans or what lines of credits or committed capital that you can have in place that, greatly exceed what you'll need. And if you do that, then you'll be successful.
One last question for you, Matt. What technology is changing really, really rapidly. How do you see the role of the treasurer changing on the back of that tech advancement?
Yeah, I think the treasurer will need to make sure that, that company whatever company they're at has the best-in-class systems that are in place. Allowing for as close to real-time reporting as possible to facilitate decision making. Given the speed of technological advancement, the treasurer will need to partner with their IT teams. It's not kind of it used to be that if they need something, they go to IT, or IT then comes says, hey, we got this, and it needs to be much more of a collaborative working relationship given the speed of technological advancement. And I'd also say that you need to invest in scalable systems, because every company is looking to grow, and you want to make sure that you have an infrastructure that supports rather than impedes the company's ability to grow.
Matt, that's been an absolute pleasure chatting today. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to catching up next time I'm in LA.
Sounds great. Thanks again for having me.